My name is Steve Weintraub. I'm editor-in-chief of a website called Collider. I am ridiculously happy to be moderating this panel with all these amazing people from I Know This Much Is True. I would love to, we're going to get in. We have so much to talk about, but before we get started, I would love for everyone to introduce themselves.
Yeah, hi, I'm Derek Cianfrance. I'm the director, the writer, and executive producer.
I'm Jody I'm the cinematographer.
I'm Inbal Weinberg. I'm the production designer.
I'm Kasia Maimone. I'm the costume designer.
And I'm Jim Helton, one of the editors on the show.
We're all going to take a look at the trailer, and then we're going to jump right on in.
We're on borrowed time, Dominic. We're just wallowing in our greed and spiritual filth. And now it's time to pay. We're going to pay the price.
Okay, I don't mean to change the subject. How's your coffee, buddy?
Have you had time to look at the menu?
How are we going to prevent the vengeance of God if we have no respect for human life?
If she would have just let me raise him the way he should have been raised, maybe he would have ended up on the bottom the way he did.
Ray, he's a paranoid schizophrenic. It's not Mom's fault. It's not anybody's fault.
There was an incident.
The heart is full, now it's spilling.
Hey, Dominic?
Barreling down the stairs.
No! It's my life! It's my life! Dominic! Please!
What'd you do?
If I had kids, I would not let this man near my children.
I'm probably more dangerous than he is. This guy is harmless.
Your brother was placed in a forensic hospital because he's seriously mentally ill.
Are you the social worker? Can I talk to you, please? Don't you even touch him, man!
I have to take care of my brother. That's just something that I have to do. I have to do it.
Don't you get it? Your mom is dying.
I think you need to let go a little.
You don't just give up on the people you love.
Promise me, Dominic.
I'm gonna get you out of here. I promise.
I think we can all agree that there has never been, television has never been better than it is right now. It is, there's so much amazing content. But I Know This Much Is True was easily one of my favorite series of this year. And I know a lot of people haven't watched it yet. So I would love to sort of jump in and for each of you, talk a little bit about why you think people should tune in to the series when there is so much great content out there. Derek, let's start with you.
Well, the first thing I'd like to do, if I can, Steve, is just I wanted to pay a little tribute to the composer of this series, Harold Budd, who passed away recently from COVID-19. And we had wanted him to be here with us on this panel. You know, Harold is really an American treasure. Working with him on this show was such a special experience. You know, when I first got the job to start writing this series, I spent like 3 weeks staring at my computer and I couldn't write. I was just Googling things and buying stuff on the computer. And I bought myself a record player and I bought myself a Harold Budd album, Serpent and Quicksilver. And when that album arrived at my house, I played it. And when the first piano note hit, it unleashed the writing of this for me. And I wrote the script in 3 weeks, just flipping the record over. And, you know, when we went into production, I shared that album with all of the collaborators who were here and the actors. And it was really our North Star of inspiration while we were shooting the whole show. And then this really amazing thing happened. We cut the show using all of Harold's original music. And then we sent Harold the show. And we screened it for him and said, "Hey, Harold, do you have anything you want to do for the show?" And he wrote this whole new amazing score. One of his last works was the score for this series, and I just feel it was such a special collaboration with him, and I just wanted to pay a little tribute to him here at the top of this. He should be here with us right now. We've all lost too many people to this COVID thing, and anyway, that's one reason to watch this show, is to see one of the great American masters at work.
I love this show because it doesn't feel like TV. It feels like a movie. And I think it's really singular in that way. And I also think it's really life affirming.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the great joys was to watch Mark in his two different forms as Dominic and Thomas. As we were shooting, we of course couldn't see it. So when I was finally watching the show, it was mesmerizing, because even though we were on set every day, like watching it together was, I kind of barely noticed my own work watching the show because Mark was so incredible. So I think that would be my reason.
I think it was an experience of discovery of what Derek and Mark presented on a plate to us, like a direct look at suffering, examining family and complications of this human connections that are so tangled out, are so complicated and so loaded with the past and history. And honestly, when they approached me with this material, I was like, you guys are crazy. This is impossible to do. This is like, you loaded up every human suffering into the plate. This is never going to work. And we fought and fought and fought. And then when I watched it and when we started working on it, and those guys obviously know what suffering is, they knew how to come out of this suffering. And I thought, holy shit, this is amazing. They know how to guide us emotionally through this process. And it was one of those projects that it's experience of a lifetime, because you never have that kind of a journey in a material. And I feel like I think that once you watch those 6 parts, you come to the end and you walk out and it's like catharsis that happened. And I was kind of blown away at the end of what those men delivered.
I think everybody said it. I think you have all the reasons why to watch it. It was a labor for all of us. It was years, and it was very much. I think a lot of love was poured into it.
I think that everyone watching this panel right now will be familiar with how things are made. And they all know press notes and they've all heard the vanilla story. I want to get in and talk about what is something that you guys, for each person, what is something that you were not expecting to deal with during the making of this project that was like a real hurdle that you had to overcome that came out of left field?
What came out of left field?
What didn't?
Really? I see, my whole idea about filmmaking is about killing expectation. I think when you expect something in filmmaking or life, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. And so I think it's the key to filmmaking for me is preparation. And you prepare for every possible outcome that you could have. And you have to have a scientific mind when you approach something like this. And so I felt like the biggest obstacle we had was just stamina, right? Because it was 116 days. There was 371 pages. It was this one crew that did the whole thing. And we had to start with the same energy that we were going to end with. And we were trying to do things that we had no idea if they were going to work. We were taking Mark Ruffalo and shooting him as Dominic, one character, one of the twin brothers, and we shot that character for 16 weeks, and then we told him to go away for 6 weeks, and we shot these Italians, in a whole movie in Italian to tell the story of the grandfather, and we told the story of these twins as kids in the 50s, and then we told them the story of the twins in the 60s with a whole nother set of actors, and then Mark came back having gained 30 pounds. And then we had to shoot this flip side of things that we shot like 4 or 5 months ago. And I don't think any of us knew that it was going to necessarily work. There was no expectation for it to work. It was just an expectation to explore try to explore the truth of these characters and of mental illness and of people really truly living with mental illness.
All of the people who worked on this film, including people who are on the Zoom, are really just the best at what they do. And you can never stop thinking. You can never stop, you know, it could just be like a little insert you're shooting with Derek and it could turn into like the whole scene. And so you just always have to be on point. You always have to be thinking, you always have to be making it better. And that's what kept me going. That's what kept me kind of engaged and like on point.
You sort of prepare for everything to come out of left field. You have to sort of build a world where anything can happen. So I think for me, because this was such a big show, it was the platform that was different. It was kind of like doing what we always do, but all of a sudden on such a big scale. It felt epic at times. And I mean, the one thing I am going to say is one night I woke up to someone banging on my door. It was my location manager and told me that our set was on fire.
Yes.
So yeah, that was definitely out of the field. That was quite a night, one of the highlights or lowlights of our careers, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
We covered every decade of last century in costume. So we started in the hundreds and go to 2000. So once we put the shooting calendar, each decade was posted with different colors. We looked at the shooting calendar and the amount of mixture of colors that was on the calendar. I was like, this is impossible. There's like, this will never, how the hell will we pull it off? Jumping between all the periods and, you know, doing fittings for all those different extras and signifying the changes of times at the same time, trying not to be too stuck in the period and really serving the story. But we did it, you know, after a while, you truly train your mind, you adapt, like you learn that crazy color combination. And after a while, we all knew what we were doing. I think it's just like, as Derek said, it's all about preparation and having enough time. We had an amazing support of our producers, and it was a production that was it was just a well-functioning machine. We all supported each other. We all heard each other. And I think that that's what made it fun. And even if it was like super difficult, it was just a fun challenge. I mean, fun and this material doesn't necessarily go together, but we did.
But it was a joy. It was a joy.
Enjoyed a lot.
It was a joy.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're like dealing with stories that are about like harsh things, that's where you have to live your life at the fullest. So I felt like when we were shooting this, it was like I felt like we were on vacation. I mean, maybe I'm delusional, but I felt like it was 116 days of being on vacation.
It was the most disciplined vacation ever.
But also,
it was like a super disciplined vacation. You had to be really on it.
Yes.
The actors that were coming in, the casting that we had, that Derek brought to us, it's like every person that walked in, it was, I want to say it was a party. It was an experience. It was a discovery. Each person was bringing a whole world to the story. So I think that when you work on a material that keeps growing, it's just so exciting. And that material kept growing every day. And then Derek would take whatever we grew and take it to a whole other level, sometimes in the war zone. Sometimes it was just really interesting.
In terms of left field, with the job itself, Derek tasked me to watch all the footage. So that was a huge undertaking to be watching all the footage all the time.
How many hours, Jim?
I have no idea.
600 hours.
It was unreal. So I was constantly watching footage, taking pictures of things, sending to probably bothering Jody more than he wanted to be bothered, and just kind of telling everybody how much I loved what they were doing.
I have a question for you, Derek.
Yeah.
Why do you take so much pride in the number of hours? I do too, but I'm just curious.
I just think there's when I go to a buffet, for instance, I get so many plates of food. I can't help myself but getting so many plates of food. So it's and so when I'm making a movie, it's like going to a buffet, and it's like gold all around me. And I just like want to gather all this stuff. I want to get some of the prime rib. I want to get some of the shrimp scampi. I want to get some broccoli. I got to get some salad, all these vegetables. There's a lot of good desserts here. And I want to put it all together. Like I can't stop myself. I don't have control because the time I get to go to a buffet or make movies is so rare. You know, you have worked so hard, so many years. This is like 5 years of writing this thing and working for it to finally be able to go to the buffet restaurant with all of my family. And then we get to go there. So I take great pride in the feast we get to have. And so we shot 2 per 35 millimeter film on this. And I think we set a record. We shot like 1.7 million feet of film or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a lot of
you got the record. You got the record, buddy.
If I can jump in, and I just want to say, what wasn't the motto on set? Let's keep Kodak in business.
Yes, that was. We loved that. That was
right. Who came up with that for the first time?
Definitely Jim. No, it was Derek. And also, I mean, who knows how Kodak would be doing this year if it wasn't for last year, right?
Hey, one thing I want to say about left field, though, is also like left field is the best stuff. That's where all the best moments come from. You know, that's what we try to make the whole show out of, is these moments that surprise us. And that's what makes all those 116 days of shooting really, you have to be awake, you have to be alert, you have to be engaged, because surprises come all the time from actors, from situations, from just life creeps in. That's one thing I always want to have happen, and these people on the Zoom here allowed that to happen. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes with crews, it's a lot about controlling what is in front of the camera, and we certainly tried to do that. There's a lot of magic tricks we were trying to make happen, you know, by jumping all these time periods, by having one actor play 2 people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But so you had to control a lot, but they were able to, all these people on the Zoom were also nimble enough to allow life and mistakes and accidents and left field to creep in. And I think that's what ultimately makes the film we made alive.
Completely. I have some actual individual questions, if you guys don't mind. For Derek, one of the reasons I think this resonated so powerfully for me is that, and I think it's for all of us, mental illness is an American pandemic that nobody talks about. It's like always pushed to the side. It's always in the shadows. And I think all of us have known people that have really dealt with issues. And this series really shines a light on that issue. Can you sort of talk about the fact that why is it that why this isn't dealt with more? And can you sort of talk about why it was so important for you personally to tell this story?
Yeah, well, personally, you know, I have, you know, there's mental illness in my family, and pretty much every family and every person I've ever met has a close relationship with someone near to them that has some sort of mental illness, some more severe than others. And I find that it's oftentimes like a secret shame, and people don't really talk about it too much. And I always felt like if you could talk about the thing, like I didn't feel any shame in it. And so I wanted to try to look at real life and real people. And I didn't want to relegate those who are afflicted with mental illness to be defined just simply by their affliction. Rather, I wanted to see them as people, as human beings, and to show the effect and that those situations have on other people in their lives. And I really wanted to look at caretakers. And, you know, this film at the end of the day was dedicated to my sister, who passed away, you know, while we were making it, and she was a caretaker. And the thing about caretakers to me that I always noticed, or a common thread between caretakers, was that they took care of other people, but oftentimes they they failed to take care of themselves. And so I wanted to look at the caretaker and ask that question of who takes care of the caretaker.
Jody, I want to ask you, obviously in this day and age, there's a lot of debate. Most people are shooting digitally. And I'm curious if you could talk about those early conversations with you and Derek about shooting on film versus digital, and why you ultimately decided that you guys were going to shoot on film.
Well, the first idea for that came from Derek. It was part of the first conversation we ever had about the show. And I think ultimately the reason for that is because of the time period of the show, that it takes place during sort of the whole life of filmmaking through the early 90s, and that format is kind of the most appropriate for that period of time to make it feel like that period of time. And then the second thing was that we wanted to have one format, one look, sort of one style for the show throughout. So rather than changing the style of the show for different time periods, to have one kind of unifying look to it. And so that one format that felt like it fit that whole time period was film.
Inbal, I was curious if you could talk a little bit about one of the things that I love about Derek's work, and this applies to everybody, is everything feels so authentic and true. And I wanted to know if you could sort of talk about how that permeates into your department and the way you bring your art to life.
Sure. I think, we start with a lot of visual research, and it comes on this show. It was very interesting because we had to do so many different time periods. So we did a ton of historical research, but at the same time, we kind of take inspiration from everything. We go on location scouts and we photograph what is around us. We photograph our own homes, or we saw like mental institutions, and we just talk to people about their own experiences. So it's kind of a mixed bag of inspiration. But then, of course, the special thing about Derek is that nothing can be fake. It's like he hates artifice, even though we make movies. So everything has to be extremely authentic. Everything has to work. It has to function. Like if you came onto most of our sets, you could probably live in them. So it's a lot of work for the art department to create this layer upon layer of life, and for the actors to kind of just feel like they are walking into their own homes. So even though you don't necessarily see it on screen, every fridge is full and every drawer is full, and there's rooms that you never even see on screen that are completely dressed. So it's a way of working that's very unusual, but also it creates, and I know Kasia kind of had gone through the same process. It sort of creates a world for the actors to work with that permeates in some ways that are not even visual.
Kasia, I wanted to actually ask you, there's a flashback episode. I hate doing spoilers for people that haven't seen it, but we've touched on it. And I love this flashback episode. I think it's incredible. And I know that, when you're making a 6-episode series, it's hard maybe to spend all this time on one episode, but this episode is so critical to the entire series. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what it was like to try to do your job and make it as authentic as you could, with specifically on that flashback episode. I thought your work was great.
Thank you. As Inbal described, we start in a very similar way. The process starts from incredibly detailed research, and I've worked with this phenomenal researcher, Susanna Gilbo, for many years. She's a woman who had several jobs, and she's like this anthropologist of human race. And she finds the most obscure images and creates visual library that becomes a Bible for all of us to communicate. And I think that that's such a strong point. And then we take pieces of reality, and then once you have pieces of reality, they somehow ring true in the characters that we are creating. It resonates some truth. We obsessed so much about creating the worlds, as Inbal said, that sometimes those worlds you don't see. And I was telling Derek, I was like, Derek, why are we doing it? We will never see it on camera. And he was like, but we'll feel it. So we would create this giant world so we could feel it. And it all added up to this world that characters were immerse themselves in. And I think that that's why it felt, you know, it felt real.
Yes, 100%. Jim, want to jump in? You've touched on it already. You watched 600 hours of footage. I'm curious, that's a lot of footage. I think anyone watching understands what that number really means. But I'm curious, what is it like when you're watching this footage? How are you picking out the takes that you think are the ones? Because obviously, we haven't even touched on it yet, but Ruffalo and Rosie O'Donnell and all the performers in this are so tremendous. Is it on you to be like, it's take 4, it's take 2? Are you taking note? How does that process actually, what was that like?
There's notes that are taken for sure, but I'm watching everything and then talking to Derek. And like, we're in constant communication, talking about what's going on, what the intent is. And sometimes that intent ends up being what we do. And sometimes it ends up teaching us what we shouldn't do and then leading us to another place. All this stuff, all the takes just keep transforming and transforming until we finally find the consistency of performance. So it takes, you can't, there is usually no one take. It may feel that way. And if it does feel that way, that's fantastic because we've achieved some sort of invisibility, which is one of the best things that we can do. So that you're just in the story, you're not thinking about the editing at all.
I could ask you guys literally another 17 questions each, but if you can believe it, we're already out of time. I'm just going to say that for anyone watching this right now, I know this much is true, is absolutely one of the best things you're going to watch this year. And I really, really recommend checking this one out. On that note, I'm just going to say a huge thank you to all of you guys for participating in this talk and to our friends at HBO, not only for producing this, so everyone, right now, this 30-minute thing, but for making this series, because it is an important and great series that I really want people to watch.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.